the cloud. All right, guys. So here we are, real estate titans. We're going to talk about all things in real estate investment, how to get started. This call is for, again, real estate investors, entrepreneurs, mortgage brokers, property managers, anyone who really does work in the real estate space. So we're going to talk about this call how to really expand and really grow our investment portfolio. So number one, get really good at what you do, which we just talked about: real estate brokerage, sales, property management, like your stream of income. I know Ron has another business. Like most real estate agents are very entrepreneurial. So get really good at business and what you do to make money. Now you got money, but that's what we call working income, right? You have to hustle to make that money, which I know a lot of older realtors that are running out of that hustle. I'm nowhere close to that. David and I always meet and sit down with like older real estate agents, not by age, but years into business. Like I've been in it for 16 years. At some point you get tired. You're like, I don't want to work every night and weekend and hold an open house for every weekend and keep making people rich. So get really good at making income. After you do that, find the ways to make more passive income if you can. But if you can't, this is what we're going to talk about today. You buy real estate. The second thing I want to talk about is getting into flipping, okay? And people think that flipping homes is very active, okay? So they think that like I have to know so much, I have to get a contract, or I have to do this and that. For me, my business partner, who's my brother, runs all of our project management, which makes my life easier. I can sell real estate. We divide and conquer. But what if you don't have that relationship? What do? You could still find opportunities to flip houses. And we're not the only ones. You could partner with agents that'll split the profit with you. I know there's a competitor in our area that does that. Or you could find a strategic partner that puts up the money, or you could find a strategic partner that does the construction. So whatever it is that your weakness is, you could always partner. And I always love this quote, like a small piece of a big pie is better than a big piece of nothing. Like we could all make money together. If none of us are going to do a flip this month, but there's a flip opportunity for 100 grand, even if we split it three ways, then you could still make, three people can make 30 grand. The average revenue on a flip for us is about 80 grand. For home investors, which is a huge flipping franchise, the number one in the world, that number is about, or it's probably over 100 grand. So there's a lot of opportunities in flipping homes. And regardless, I know people get emotional with flipping homes. Like some people say you should always list the home on the market. But regardless of what you think, I always like to say, like, you can't change the mindset of people. And 20% of all homes will sell for cash transactions. Some people do not want to list. They don't want people in their house. They don't want their neighbors to know. They might lose a house to foreclosure, so there's a time crunch, right? So they want to get some money versus nothing. So people will sell cash, and there's plenty of opportunities. Actually, I'm actually not even gonna say the agent's name, but an agent is on this call. I'm not gonna say it's a guy or girl. Told me a story about how somebody lost a house to foreclosure that had equity in it. And I've had that situation personally. In 2010 to 12, we used to work for Bank of America doing their foreclosures. And I'd be shocked at how many homes I would walk into and people would say, "Hey, I'm losing my house." And I would say, what do you mean? They're like, foreclosure date set in 2 weeks. I'm like, we're going to save your house. We're going to get it out of foreclosure. But people waited and waited and waited to try to save their house and optimistic that they would hit the lottery or something. But they had like 100 or 200 grand in equity. But now the bank's going to take it. You're going to lose all your equity. So those situations make a lot of sense for a cash buyer, a cash opportunity. Okay. So we talked about number one, right? Get good at your business. Number two, flip houses, because as real estate professionals, you're all going to come across opportunities where people need cash and they have to sell fast. And number three is invest in real estate. And this is my favorite wealth building strategy for anyone on this call. If you're a real estate agent, or real estate broker, real estate anything, you should invest in real estate because it's going to generate income that comes in every single month without you having to do anything or much work. So our real estate business, we've made over six figures, many months. Our average, I think, is 50,000 a month for the last 5 years in revenue, gross revenue, right? That we obviously don't keep that, being an open book here. Now, my real estate investment portfolio, which I own with my brother, brings in 20,000. As everybody that's in real estate or mortgages or any kind of business like that, you know, you can make 150,000 one month and next month 25,000. My real estate portfolio and property management business, they bring about together combined 50,000 every month. Even if I've had a 15-month eviction, I've had issues that have happened. We've had issues that have happened. Even if you have those issues, it's still 20,000 a month, give or take, right? Or 50,000 if you include the property management. And that is a scalable business. That's a scalable model. Now, the biggest objection we get is like, I don't want to manage real estate. I don't want to deal with tenants. I've had issues before. You could always do property management or find a way to invest in real estate more passively. All right. So that's kind of the big picture view. So that's what I wanted to talk about in this call is like the 3 things you need to do as somebody who wants to get into the real estate game. Number 1, you have to get good at your business, make money. If you don't have any money, it's hard to invest, right? If you're figuring out how to pay your bills. Most of us are way beyond that on that call, but some of us could be getting started. Number 2, as you find opportunities, real estate agents get all of the deals first. Real estate brokers do too. Property managers, anybody who's in the real estate space. So find opportunities, partner, and flip houses. And then number 3, make sure you take that and you invest in real estate to build wealth. Next thing I wanted to talk about is what I've learned from investing in real estate. And sometimes it's like having conversation with Mark, but as well as other investors, but I never really understood this on a deep level. Real estate is the best investment for a couple of reasons. Number 1, if I bought $1 million worth of stock, how much cash do I need? Anybody? We're opening this up now. It's going to be more interactive.
The whole
How
million.
much cash?
You need the whole
Whole
million.
million, yeah.
$1 million. If I buy $1 million property, how much cash do I need?
50K.
You're a lender, you know.
50K plus closing costs.
50K plus closing costs. When that when the real estate goes up, 10% or 1.2 million, my 50 grand that I put into it just grew by 200 grand. When I put $1 million to the stock market, it goes up to 200 grand. I had to put in $1 million to go to 200 grand. So number 1 is leverage. It's crazy leverage. Number 2, which is what we also just talked about, is appreciation. Real estate appreciates over time at 3 to 4%, maybe some years 5, and some markets higher, and some markets lower. But over a long period of time, real estate's always going to appreciate. Always has, always will. We do classes on this in KW where we literally put this on the chart. It's going to forever appreciate. Number 3, I never understood this at a deep level till I bought real estate, is depreciation. Okay? The richest people in the world, or some of them, don't pay taxes because they don't own enough real estate. And just if anybody's a tax accountant or knows high-level taxes, he could explain this better than me. But just at a high level, if I buy a 4-family for $1 million, I get to subtract out the land value and depreciate the value of the property by 29.5 years. So you divide it by 12, that's straight line depreciation, basically offsetting my tax basis. And if you buy enough real estate, you could virtually pay 0 in taxes. Okay, I won't get too much into deets, but when you experience this tax savings, you're like, wow, this is amazing. All right, number 3 is I call it debt pay down. Every month I get my mortgage statement. I'm like, wow, we owe less and less on this building. So the 4-family in North Andover right here, it's worth now $1.5 million because of appreciation. But every month I look at the mortgage statement, I'm like, wow, we actually owe less than $700,000 now, which started at like $780, but the tenants make those payments. And then number 4, which is cash flow. Typically, most people think about 1 or 2, right? They think about, I want to buy it because it goes up in value, or I want to buy it for the cash flow. But those other things working together, so cash flow, appreciation, depreciation, and debt pay down, along with the fact that it's super leverageable, all of those factors working together is why it's one of the best wealth opportunities in real estate. And you guys all know it. How many people have you made millionaires through investing, helping them buy, sell, or invest in real estate, right? A ton. So you know the business better than anybody else. The question is, why aren't you doing it? And now, with that being said, my lesson for the day is over. So I want to open it up with questions, concerns, some feedback as far like, why aren't you investing in real estate? What's holding you back? Or any questions you have for the group. we could make it a mastermind session. And then next week, we're going to be back onto the speaker format. So I'm going to get a speaker that owns a bunch of units. But my question to you guys, is it better to get a speaker for the next speaker, because we've had a bunch, to that's somebody that owns like 20 to 30 or 10 units, or do you guys want somebody that's like 400 units? Like, what's more realistic, or where this group is? Like, what would you guys like to see? I'm going to pick on Ron. I think you're muted.
Yes, one step ahead of you. I've already put my question in the chat, brother.
You're so good. By the way, real quick compliment to you. Mark Carovo, my friend who was on the call last week, was like, that guy Ron had some amazing questions. I'm like, yeah, he always does.
I'm serious, man. I want to get the deets. I want to know the inner workings, enough of the flash about buying real estate. I want to know the nitty-gritty about buying real estate, the steps we go through, the road bumps you've hit, how do you get past them, the hidden things that we need to know about, at a little level. Right.
Absolutely. And I love this question, because I also think the way you invest in real estate is going to depend on your temperament. What I mean by that is, like, if you guys know me, a lot of you do know me personally. Like, everybody says, like, oh, he's so calm, he's so relaxed, he has like amazing patience, which is all true. I have no problem with dealing with problems that are tenants. I always tell all my property management clients and our tenants, like, yes, you get crazy, stupid phone calls and crazy, stupid issues, but I like it. I don't mind dealing with it. To me, it's easy. I'm a full-time real estate agent, right? I love doing this. And then I manage properties. So for me, it's like, I don't have a full-time job. I have nothing else to do. I can solve problems. But some of the problems that arise, oh, and just to finish that thought, to Ron's point, some people have no temperament. I know a guy I sold a 2-family for. Every time his phone rang and the tenant complained, he was like, I sell this place, sell this place. If you're like that, you should not invest in real estate the way I do, which is very active, or the way we do. You should either get a property management company and pay them the 10%, get your profit and loss statement every month, and they take care of all the details. Or you can invest passively, which we're not going to talk about on this call. That's going to be on a future call, through syndication or REITs, which still has a lot of the same benefits that real estate has. Some of the issues are real life issues. We bought a building where we inherited a tenant around the time of COVID, and we had to evict this tenant because he wasn't paying the rent, which we were raising from about $1,700. So on average, that building has about $3,000 in rent a month right now. My approach is I always work with tenants and try to figure it out, a solution. And I fall for, I know my weaknesses. Like, I love everybody and I fall for every lie, right? I'm the worst hiring person. I'm like, oh, I love you, we should hire him. And Mindy, who used to work for me, like, what? Do not hire this person, or my brother. But me, I love everybody and I believe everybody. We had a 15-month eviction. So for 15 months, this guy lived in our property. We could not get him out because he was a veteran with kids. He had other problems, but he was not paying any rent. Kept promising he would pay rent. Okay, so $1,700 a month times 15 months, plus attorney fees. All in all, when all set was done, and you have to put his stuff in storage when he moves out, Ron. That's another issue, which we don't know about. Like, you have to take his stuff, you pay for it to go in storage, okay? That, like, the constable comes, you're paying the constable. So we, all in all, we're into this like $30,000. The bank account would have had $30,000 more. And the way I mentally overcome that is it's called the cost of doing business. Because human nature, like survival, this is just mindset. We are all negative biased, right? Because if you weren't negative back in the day, you'd get eaten by a lion. Like, you always have to be a pessimist. Who's hunting me? I'm going to die, right? So negative experiences and negative situation hold about 3 times more weight than positive. So that's why we have to work so hard to be positive. And the way I deal with an issue like that 15-month eviction is I always call it the cost of doing business. Sometimes people have one property and they have a similar experience and they go, oh, it was so bad, I'm never going to invest in real estate. But from my experience, if you have 30 and you're doing a good job, or I've seen 100, we've had people on the call with 200. I've had friends that have 400 units. I've had a landlord that had 300 units. When you have that many, 1 out of 100 will be a bad experience. And we call that the cost of doing business. But you're not going to, unless you're a horrible operator or have horrible property management, If you have 10 units, you're not going to have 10, 15-month evictions. That's not going to happen. Most people are good and most people pay their rent. The problem is when you have one bad one, it stings so bad and you tell everybody and it changes your perspective. And now you don't want to be a real estate investor. So that's probably the worst thing that happened to us directly that I could tell you about. Now you wanted to hear other problems. So I'm going to give you one more. Okay. We bought another building and the city basically, we pulled a permit, did the right thing. We were talking about permits in our team meeting the other day. We pulled a permit and the city said, hey, you have to put chimney liners in all of these chimneys. This building's been here for 100 years. What do you mean we have to put chimney liners? Oh, and put all of your tenants in the hotel and you have to do it in like a week. So we literally did not expect, but because you know how when you have to spend money fast and people know it, they're going to take you to the cleaners. We had to spend like $14,000-$15,000 that week, right after we bought the building. So issues like this will happen and things will arise. And if you don't want to deal with them, get property management. And if you do have the temperament to deal with it, you're going to make a lot of money because like those issues are worth millions of dollars, especially if you stretch it out over owning a building for 10, 15, 20, or 30 years. It's a great question.
So I put it in the chat, but basically, tenant-friendly state. Would you pick New Hampshire versus Massachusetts going forward now? Like, are you looking to invest in New Hampshire? And is it really true that it's easier in New Hampshire to get rid of a tenant if you had to? Would that situation have been easier for you in New Hampshire?
It's a great question. So we had a lot of like other investors on the call that say they would never remember that kid from last week, he only invests in Manchester. So we've had people on the call that said they would never invest in Massachusetts. David and I invest in Massachusetts specifically because we like to invest in our own backyard. We know the area, we know the market. Again, remember, this is what I think most people forget. Most of the time, if you're a great operator, you're not going to have issues if you treat people right and you're fair to them. Okay. I work I've had hundreds of tenants. I started as a rental broker. Most of the time, I can work out any issue. Every once in a time, you'll have either like a combative liar, a crazy person, a psycho, or somebody that's just not going to pay no matter what. But all things being equal, I do hear, and I don't know, we don't own property in New Hampshire, David and I, but I do hear it's much easier to be a landlord in New Hampshire than it is in Mass. Mark, do you know anything about the tenant laws in New Hampshire, and do you agree? You might know more than me in New Hampshire. So the easy answer, Ron, is I think it is easier in New Hampshire to evict a tenant. That's the easy answer. And that David might know too. I don't know.
I actually don't know the Mass law in regards to it. I just know what I've heard from others.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and I've heard it's easier in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
We actually had Tim Dismaris on the call last week. He called me after the call. He's like, that was so amazing. Thanks so much for sharing. And he was telling me like, I'd never buy in Mass. And he has a bunch of properties in New Hampshire. But again, David and I own and manage over 35 units. That's ours and third-party management in Massachusetts, probably for the last like 10 years. I don't know how long we've been doing management business, and we almost never have an issue.
Question, is there a big difference between residential property and commercial property? Like, do you own commercial units yet? And do you find it's easier to deal with commercial tenants? Or is that a whole different ball game depending on the economy and all that kind of stuff?
Ron, you ask amazing questions. So one of the benefits of being in the real estate business in any form or capacity that I believe is I got to watch, like we had a landlord that owned 300 units residential. So David and I sold like 10 million worth of real estate for him. And you get to learn so much just watching, like you're helping him making the money, and you learn by watching what they do and how they do it, which is amazing about this business. We also have landlords that have a lot of commercial property. From my understanding, this is how I would divide it. From what I've learned so far, we personally do not own any commercial right now. This is my understanding of commercial versus residential. The more challenging a property is, the more work it needs, the harder it is to manage, the more money you're going to make, the more cash flow. So when you're young and ambitious, I would buy multifamily investments, right? Because that's where you're going to make the most money, most appreciation. And it's also going to require the most work if you're doing it yourself. Commercial is where most affluent investors park their money because it's very hands off, much lower cap rate. Triple net leases simply mean that the tenants pay all of the expenses, including in some cases if the roof or the heating system goes. So it doesn't need much management, but you make a lot less money. So most people start. This is the if you read the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, you don't have this book, Ron, come by my office, I give it to you.
I got 3 copies.
The trajectory of most real estate agents or most real estate investors, I should say, how they get started, they start with 2s, 3s, and 4s. Once they have too many to manage and too many roofs, they go start selling them off for 1031 exchanges, and they buy one building, 6 to 10 units, all in one place. And then they build that portfolio up. Once that gets to be too much and they're closer to retirement, they sell that off and they buy commercial strip malls because they have the money and they use a 1031 exchange. And that's a very passive approach, which gives you, it's more safe and it's more secure and it's way less headaches. Leo had a question, cash flow question, when possible, to ask. Leo, you are the MVP of this call. I think you've been on every single one and you're always on camera with video. So you could just jump in. You're basically my co-host, Leo.
I'm just here to learn, man. That's all. So I have a specific property I'm looking to move on from, right? If I were to rip cash out of it, maybe I can get 150K. If I were to sell it, I can probably get 3 to 350. So the challenge that I'm facing right now is the cash flow perspective of the property right now. It may be expenses is like 2,300 a month and it brings in 5,000 in rent a month. So it cash flows very, very well, but I want to level up so it's like if I rip cash out and this property that's cash flowing at 100% return pretty much now becomes a 1-for-1, or maybe it's a loss of $100 a month. Like, would that be a turnoff to move on? Because like I'll talk to clients and I was like, is it really that bad if you're not cash flowing and it's costing you $100, $200 a month because the bigger piece of the pie is still being paid by the tenants?
It is a great question. So most of the knowledge I have is from reading books, listening to podcasts, but the most is really being out there and talking to investors. Like I know the number one owner of real estate in Dorchester owns 400 properties. So there's different mindsets around this. It really depends on you as an investor. Some people, I knew a lady that bought 60 units in Chelsea when everybody was like, do not buy in Chelsea. Had zero cash flow, worked 2 jobs to make payments, but eventually those properties appreciated and the cash flow caught up. Now she lives in like Honduras or something half the year. Typically speaking, if you talk to an investor like Jeff, who was on the call last week, we had lunch. Like I went to Southie, had lunch with him. He'll say on average he cash flows about 500 a door. Okay. When you manage a property, it's about 150 to 250 a door. When you own, it's about 500 a door. This is for people who own a lot of real estate, pretty close estimate on average. Okay. So you want some cash flow because you're also going to have expenses. So if you have zero cash flow, you're going to have to come out of pocket. You're cash flowing like almost 1,000 a door. That's an amazing cash flow opportunity. That's hard to give up because on my personal units, David and I think we do about 600 a door right now. Now, with that being said, what I would personally try to do is keep that cash flow and pull the equity line out and go buy something bigger. And then eventually when you sell it, you do a 1031 exchange. So this is a real life story. My first condo I bought in 2015, I paid 187 for. The value went up in 5 years to 350. I got an equity line of about 150,000. My brother David did the same thing, by the way. So now we got 150 and 150 in equity. We both pulled out equity and we bought a 4-unit, which was our first investment property. And we used the equity to buy that down. When it came to sell that condo, I was very emotional because my first condo I ever bought. As emotional as I could get. So emotional for me, which is not very emotional at all. And I was like, oh man, I don't want to sell this. But I managed a whole building of 20 units single-handedly. It was all on me. So I knew the moment I moved out and moved on, that value of that property and the management would go down. And in hindsight, it was a great move. So when I sold at the peak, I paid off my equity line and I already had turned that into a 4-unit. But the longer you hold real estate, the more money you make. So if you don't have to sell it, don't sell it unless you 1031 exchange. With getting such great cash flow, I think I would pull equity, buy something else, especially if you only have one. Build it up, build it up, build it up. The strategy that I hear most investors say is like, once you have a bunch, let's say you have 10, do you only have one right now? Is that accurate?
Yeah, just that one that
Okay.
since we
So
started.
say you keep it, you find a way to buy another one, and then 5 years on this call, and now you have 10. Then what most investors will do is they'll evaluate, look, these two are the worst performing. I always have problems. They're the worst cash flow. You sell those two because now you have enough of a pool to look from. You sell those two, and then you 1031 exchange into bigger, better property.
So Arthur, like, right, so like when you pull cash out of a property, right, I'm gonna add another note, like a loan on the property, right? So now I go from cash flowing 1,000 a door to maybe not on that
Right.
specific property, right? Because I've leveraged the equity, maybe even expenses eat into it. So that's where I'm like trapped in between where it's like,
But
if I could 1031 it now, that's like a 20-25% down payment on a million, 1.1, right?
yeah, but that's okay if you can't cash flow
Mhm.
or you're cash flowing very little. Mark, who was on the call last week, talked about when we helped him do the strategy. So he has a business too, like you do. So he took the equity, I think it was out of his primary for the first one, which is what I did, which is what David did. A lot of people on this call. He put it into this new property. And now the cash flow goes down or is non-existent. But now you got two assets that are appreciating and maybe cash flow. So what you do is through your business and through the rental income, you pay off that equity line as quickly as possible. Now you get that equity line to zero. Let's say it's 100 grand. Now you have that 100 grand equity that you can reuse again and again and again and again. Plus you also have the 100 grand that you saved. So now you have 200 grand. So patience is a virtue in this real estate cycle. Okay. Don't be quick to sell a great performing asset. I don't know if you remember the guy, Steve Pisco, who was talking about last week. Like most of the regrets, unless it was the right decision that people make, will be because they sell a property too soon or they sell a great performing asset. And it sounds like you have a great performing asset. We could talk about this more, but from what I heard, it sounds like a very good asset.
Thank you.
What I'm hearing and learning is to really know who I am as an investor. That's step number one, Ron. What my tolerance is specifically, and then go in that direction. Yes, because just because you have no tolerance, that doesn't mean you can't invest in real estate. Because there's ways to do it very actively, which is what David and I do. And there's ways to do it very passively, which you could still get all of the benefits of investing in real estate. Like and again, we're not going to go deep into this, but there's syndication where simply all it means is like four of us put up 100,000 each and we buy a 4-unit building or whatever, 5-unit building, right? But one person, and they get paid for that, but that's okay, will manage and play an active role. The other 3 will play a limited role, right? Or all 4 play an active role, but in a different capacity. Like say David is the guy that manages all the physical work. Arthur, not Durkin, this Arthur, manages all the computer paperwork. Art Durkin maybe does all of the tenant relations, and then Ron, you do like another piece of the puzzle. So that's another way. And then the other way you could invest in real estate is a fund. Plenty of people will have a fund where they start and you basically give them money. You have no say, but you get the return and the benefit of investing in real estate. But you're a limited partner, which is almost like investing in a stock. You're not very active. Your returns will be a little lower, but if the performance is good, you'll get paid better. So there's many ways to figure that out, but I would say figure out your temperament. Because the worst thing you do, which is what I've seen investors do, get in the game, buy 2 or 3 family, always pulling their hair out. They hate it. They don't want to manage it. Then they complain about it. Every day they're talking about selling it. Then they sell it too early or at the worst time. And they typically lose money. And now they're telling everybody how bad real estate is. But that's because it was your temperament and what you bought. So yes, figure out who you are as an investor, learn. And the best way to learn in this business is by watching. Like if you really want to get into it as a real estate broker, start working with some investors. Work with more investors. As you work with more investors, you get to see like what they do. I know investors that only buy condos. I know people only buy I know people only buy commercial. So everyone is different. Figure out what's your cup of tea, right? You could be passive investor, you could be active, you could give your money. There's plenty of people that are local that'll take your money for flips and give you a return on your money, for buy and holds and give you a return on your money. So there's many ways to invest in real estate where you can get great returns without being very active. But the more active you are and the more risk you're willing to take, the more money you're going to make as a real estate investor, right? So just remember that. So if you're like, hey, I have energy, I want to learn, I want to do it hands-on, and you're very active, you're going to make a lot of money.
Question.
That shoot.
Have you been that guy where you've given the cash to a flipper rehabber guy to be that, the money guy on a flip? And if so, what type of, protections do you have in place on that? Besides like, yeah, I'm going to give you 25 grand and you're going to flip it and I'm going to get this. I mean, that might be a way for someone who doesn't want to get too dirty to invest in flipping, but I want to be protected. How do you do that?
So I've seen a lot of people lose a lot of money in bankruptcies. Like you asked a great question last week about like, hey, have you ever been through a downturn? So we all, I think most of us on this call have. So I've seen people lose money that gave investors money, then they went belly up, they didn't manage it properly. So if you do, so yes, we have done that. And if you do that, you want to make sure you properly protect yourself by putting a mortgage or a lien on the property, not just give somebody money and say, hey, go run with it. So say you gave me money. What you want to do is you're like, hey, I'm going to put up all the money for your next flip. What you want to do is you want to put a mortgage. You could do that with an attorney pretty easily, a mortgage on that property.
Good.
So that no
Yeah.
matter what happens, you get paid. And if you don't, you can foreclose. Okay. And
I
you don't.
have a buddy who is doing it right now, and he's just giving this guy money. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, he's like, oh, I trust him. He's worked on a bunch of stuff. I'm
Most of
like,
the time, it always works out. Most of the time. But the one time it doesn't, I've seen people lose 200, 300, right? Dave will tell you. We know somebody who personally did it with a friend, and they're not friends no more. They've been to court. One guy lost his whole life savings and had to rebuild 300,000. So most of the time it works out, and people forget in a good market like we have now that real estate does go down and there's adjustments and cycles. Long term, it always goes up and you win. But the only people that are forced to sell, like for example, I don't know, people on this call know this. I think I sent Ron the slide. So who remembers the 08-09 economic collapse? Single family home equities in 2008 at the peak of the market, the highest ever, was $14 trillion in home equities. When the market collapsed, take a guess what that number went down to, home equity in the United States. 2 trillion? I don't know what you're saying, Ron. You're muted.
six
That's a
trillion.
great guess. It was like about 8.5 trillion, right? So whatever that percentage is. Now, everybody that had to sell in 09, 10, 11, which I could tell you like stories of how people went bankrupt and lost money, those people all lost money, okay? Because they were forced to sell because death, divorce, disease, whatever, the four Ds of real estate. But what is U.S. equity today? So if you waited to 2009, 10, 11, 12, all the way to 2025, what is the U.S. home equities today? Wild guess? Drum roll? Anybody?
10 billion.
50 trillion.
15 trillion?
50 trillion.
Oh, that was the best guess I ever had. So it's 35 trillion. So in other words, from the greatest economic time ever, when prices were super inflated, 07, 08, the market collapsed to 8.5 trillion. And now today, if you held on that whole time, 35 trillion in US equities. So it came back and more than doubled. If it goes down, say it goes down again, we already had the worst economic collapse in US history. Like say that happens again. Even if it goes from 35 trillion to 20 trillion, it's still way more than 09, which is not that long ago. So long term, you're always going to make money and the equity is going to be there unless you are forced to sell in a downturn. And there will be a downturn again. But the way to avoid downturns is to, for example, like David and I, from this book, we're very conservative. We move slow. We have 7 units. I know people that make 0 cash flow and have 30 units, right? But they make no money. You typically will buy with 20% down and try to get 20% off on the property because it's either it needs work, it's a fixer upper, the rents are low, it's mismanaged. So instantly we're coming in at about 20 to 40% equity. All of our properties are about 15%, 50% leveraged. So that's, if the market goes, it's not going to go down by half, but if it goes down a quarter, we still got 25% equity. So we could sit there. Ron, you and I were talking about this. You could sit there and wait forever. And as long as you're cash flowing, your debt's getting paid off, who cares if it's appreciating? That's just a benefit, side benefit. Right? You only care about that when you're ready to sell. But if you're not selling for 20, 30 years, who cares? Or even 5 or 10. Right? Great questions, Ron. Thank you. I appreciate it. Let's open it up. Let's open it up Q&A style. If anybody has questions about anything we discussed so far or comments, chime in. You get to be like, Arthur, you're completely wrong. Real estate is bad. Buy stocks on margins.
What a powerful crew today. Jesus.
Oh my, I know. We
My
got
God.
Ilya here, which by the way, every Thursday, Ilya does a coffee for realtors, and it's absolutely awesome. I didn't make it yesterday because I had a listing appointment, but other than that, I would have been there.
Listing appointment? You overslept?
No, yeah, that's true. It's 9:30 a.m.
I know. I
Somewhere.
used to get, I get always people are complaining. It's too early. It's too early.
That's too
you
early.
know?
I think that's perfect.
No, but like people want real estate and cocktails, you know?
Yeah,
But,
that's true.
Yeah, but Ronnie, good to see you, buddy. So I'm getting a lot of grief right now because of some listings that I have, because I don't do a lot of investor stuff, right? I work a lot of times with retail buyers, you know,
You always
and
call me on
sellers.
your investor stuff.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, like, can I have a call with you and David after this call
Yes.
to talk about, you know, my people calling me and telling me, what are you, an idiot? You don't know how to price, you know? Which is always so nice for people to call you and tell you that, you know? So yes, I will be calling you after this call immediately.
Call me or stay on and we could chat about it for sure.
I can't wait. I can't wait. All right.
right.
Who's up? Who's up next? Thank you.